All right, everyone, we should be live. Let's make sure that's actually the case, of course. I've got two co-hosts, actually. One is out of the picture at the moment, sleeping in the corner next to the microphone. Maybe you can even hear kitty purrs. I'm not even 100% sure. Let's make sure that we're live on Rumble, that it's actually the case. Yes, we appear to be live on Rumble. Not seeing any Rumble rants. Sometimes the service goes down, so, if you are watching on Rumble... Okay, I do it. Krasdon with the first Rumble rant of the day says, Clank. Very concise. I like it that way. We'll get right into this because there's a lot of crazy shit going on today. Oh, Jesus. It's wonderful. The New York Times reporting here. Breaking news. Kiev used unmanned drones to strike two bases in the heart of Russia. A Ukrainian official confirmed in Ukraine's most brazen attack on Russia. Now, again, as I've said earlier this morning in my main video, it's worrisome. You do not have to be pro-Russia or pro-Russia invasion of Ukraine or pro-Putin to understand why this takes us closer to midnight and why NATO may not want to start a war with Russia. At this point, there's a little bit of a problem here, as I pointed out earlier. And some people keep telling me, well, nukes are incapable of accidentally going off. If they're properly designed, that's definitely the case. You do realize that some of the nuclear arsenal in Russia dates back a number of decades, correct? Look at the state that their ships are in. Do you think that it's impossible? The U.S. military almost accidentally detonated a nuclear weapon. I think it was over North Carolina years and years ago, back during the height of the Cold War. It dropped accidentally out of its plane and thankfully didn't go off. When they investigated, they realized that most of the mechanisms responsible for keeping it from going off failed. This is the United States. It prides itself on having greater technological aptitude than Soviet missile designs, and yet it almost went off. Only one last fail-safe didn't fail to actually catch, and that's the only reason that a bunch of people weren't instantly immolated by, I think, 3 megatons of blast, if I remember correctly. Would have been quite a nuclear disaster. So it is possible, to be clear. More worrisome, though, let's say you hit the bomber that's got its nukes loaded into it. And let's say, one of them gets blasted to pieces. Well, you still have the problem of that being technically a radiological attack. The Russians can use that as a cause for retaliation. It's entirely possible. Yes, Goldsboro, North Carolina, that particular incident. You can look that up. Just a second here. Are my tabs all open? Let me check this really quickly before I continue. Check my tabs. Yeah, all of those are fine. Kobo Bunny, I doubt that a nuclear weapon would go off even if struck by a bomb. It takes precise timing of the electronics to set off the compression charge exactly evenly in modern nukes. That's true. See, there's again the problem. You could have a faulty weapons design. You could have a radiological incident. Certainly, that's likely in such a scenario. That would be a problem, a little bit of a problem. Yeah, there are people that are acting all facetious. They're acting like it's no big deal that Russia was directly targeted by Ukraine. Or they say, well, should the Ukrainians not retaliate? Russia invaded them again. You're not understanding the difference between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine's not even a NATO member. It's not directly allied with any NATO country. And yet we're supplying it with all sorts of weapons and drones and shit like that. And now they are physically attacking the Russian mainland. Russia is a nuclear state. They have more nukes than anyone else in the world. There is a difference between the two. You can be pro-Slava Ukrainian and all of that and still not want World War III. Do any Ukrainians survive in a nuclear situation? No, they all get glassed. Every single one of them dies. A bunch of Europeans die. Americans die. Russians die. Probably pretty much everyone in the northern hemisphere gets irradiated. It trickles down into the southern hemisphere, causing mass problems in the entire world. You'd have mass starvation in nations that are propped up by U.S. grain shipments especially, and to an extent Russian, by the way. You end up with the breakdown of all technology. Everything would be third world and everything would be radioactive. Wouldn't that be a little bit of a problem? Is it really worth perturbing the Russians to accomplish whatever Zelensky wishes to accomplish here? If anything, now it's just going to drum up more support among the Russian population, increasing manpower. Russians will say, oh, look, shit, Putin was right. They just hit a couple of our bases and they're physically in Russia. Yeah, well, I was iffy on enlisting, but, Mother Russia calls for me. There will be people who take up that line. It'll be used as propaganda. But Putin right now is probably hunched over a laptop editing together video clips, or rather with a gun to someone's head, having them do it for him. That's a little bit of a problem now, isn't it? All Russia has to do is leave Ukraine. Simple as. That's not the way that Eastern Bloc politicking works. That's the way that the decadent West operates. That's not the way that Russia operates. And we have to be realistic about the scenario. And we're going to be talking separately about fucking John Bolton, of all things, today as well. Yeah, it's wonderful. I'd rather not be immolated in a nuclear blast. Where I am currently, I don't think would be on the table to get hit directly. But if Amsterdam gets hit, and as a NATO partner, of course, the Netherlands would take a couple of nukes. As all of the dikes break, it would cause a societal breakdown because all that brackish irradiated water backing up into the canal system would destroy all the crops. Oh, I'd probably survive, but there would be no food. How lovely. Glad I have a full stocked pantry. I should probably get some potassium iodide pills again, Again, the other problem, let's say that Ukraine gets away with this, so to speak. Russia doesn't retaliate big time. Won't Zelensky do it again? It's only a matter of time before the retaliation comes. Like a lot of people are like, well, Russia bad. Okay, you can think that Russia bad. That doesn't mean nuclear war good, just to be clear. And Ukraine is also a corrupt state. It has been for a very long time under Russian pawnery, under, Western pawnery. It doesn't make any difference. It's fucking Ukraine. This part of the world has systemic political issues with corruption. Ukraine, Belarus, Russia itself, etc. Again, people are acting like it's no big deal. Yes, Russia just got physically attacked. When's the last time that happened? And it wasn't a separatist group like the Chechen militia. When's the fucking last time that Russia at large got attacked, would be my question. It's no time recently that I know of. People like to LARP about the situation. Well, it's okay. I'll survive. I've got my bunker. Yeah, well, more power to you. I hope that you understand that there will be no electricity at some point. I hope you understand that one of the biggest problems in the wake of a nuclear war will actually be a miasmus of mold, as all of the uninhabited dwellings, because people be dying of cholera and other preventable illnesses because medical system breaks down, all of those houses will begin to rot. And they'll be full of mold. Water mains will break, gas lines will explode, cities will go up in a blaze of smoke, even if they're not hit by a nuclear weapon. I've talked about things like that in After the Ashes. I wrote a book on trying to survive the nuclear war years ago. I should probably make an updated edition, given the current socio-political situation in the world. Yeah, I know that Ukraine has been shelling border Russians for some time, but this doesn't happen anywhere near the border, just to be clear. Psychophantic. All it would take is one of those missiles accidentally hitting a civilian target, and there is an excuse to escalate. That's the other problem. These are on military bases. Okay, that's fine. What if the drone, the missile goes the wrong way? Something gets fucked up with its targeting system, and you accidentally hit a preschool. You do what the U.S. military typically does. It'd be a problem. And to Deutsche Chad, I'm not actually worried. The odds of a nuclear war are still rather low, but they are rising, and they shouldn't be. Reasonable heads should prevail and say, maybe people need to take a fucking step back. This involves both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and definitely NATO in arming Ukraine. We're tying ourselves in with a country we're not even an ally of, and giving them all sorts of weapons, and they are attacking now military targets hundreds of miles within Russia itself. Probably the Western powers should warn the Ukrainians that's not a good idea. For their own safety, if Zelensky cares about his people, why does he want to give Putin the excuse to use a tactical nuke or something like that? Really, really big problem. Yeah, no, I'm not anywhere near a nuclear target. I don't think that the Russians are going to randomly nuke Anshide. No, it'd be a waste of a nuke, to be clear. They also have a lot of missiles with conventional warheads on them, and they have a bioweapons program and a chemical weapons program. So enjoy if things pop off. You can go ahead and do the bravado thing or the Ukraine good, Russia bad, so we should just go oorah warmongering after them. Why don't you just vote for Jeb Bush if that's what you think? Sun Tzu, personally, I'm just thrilled that the adults are finally back in charge. Yeah, can you imagine this happening under Trump? Can you imagine any of this popping up? Can you imagine China gunning after Taiwan? Can you imagine any of the incursions around the world? North Korea returning to full testing, saying that they're going to get even bigger bombs. They had basically sworn it off under Donald Trump until the very bitter end. Now they're fully back in play. How lovely. Let's give Ukraine $100 billion so that they can start a nuclear war. I think we should give it to the U.S. people in the form of potassium iodide pills at this point. And by the way, we will address, this isn't on the docket, we'll address the Georgia runoff. Of course, today is the big day. Herschel Walker v. Warnock. I would encourage any Georgians watching, go ahead and end the stream and go out and vote. Actually, I don't know if the polls are open yet. Go and vote. Vote for Herschel Walker. It is a long shot for him winning. All of the polls suggest a lead, although a narrow one for Warnock. It will come down to same-day turnout partially. It'll also come down to third parties deciding, mostly last minute, whether to vote and who to vote for. If you're a libertarian, whatever, in the state of Georgia, I would ask you to vote for Herschel Walker as well. If the Democrats maintain an actual majority within the Senate, things will get messy. They will attack the filibuster, which is terrible no matter what party is in charge, by the way. They will reign over the committees that are there, and they will ram things through. And then, although the House is Republican, they will attempt to gull the handful of neocons in the House, neocon Republicans, to go along with them. They'll throw them pork barrel stuff. They'll do it that way. And McConnell has already flipped. He's working with the Democrats explicitly, so... Friendly Neighborhood Sawyer, any thoughts on the Saudis? The Line, zero carbon, carless, vertical living city concept. I heard they've started excavating. It's a pet project. It's like building some of the gigantic-ass skyscrapers in Dubai and places like that. It's a vanity project. It's, hey, we're capable of doing this, even though it's not really cost-effective and doesn't really make any sense design-wise. We're capable of creating a vertical city that's literally a straight multi-mile line. It would have been better to compact it and make it 7 or 8 rays, like a little miniature sun. It would shorten the distance of travel. It could have a centralized hub. It would make more sense. You could probably make it more environmentally friendly that way, too. You could make, design-wise, you could make it look fucking spectacular. Instead, they decided, hey, out in the middle of the desert, we're just going to build a city that is a continuous line hooked up by rail and shit. It's not, it doesn't make any sense. It's not efficient. They're doing it for vanity purposes. It may end up like one of China's ghost city projects. Hey, we built this entire city from scratch over the course of 2 years. Population 62, and all of those people are maintenance workers. You have examples of that from China. Just because the Saudis have a lot of oil revenue and they've run out of meaningful things to invest in, they've decided to make an entirely new city for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Think of all the lives they could enrich in their country if instead they took that money and they built parks. They put up energy projects. They did more exploratory drilling. I mean, there's got to be more oil there somewhere. They could do all sorts of things. Instead, they decide to make a linear city. Next news story. This is a good one. John Bolton is threatening to join the 2024 race. When you challenge the Constitution itself, this is him shit posting on Twitter, that is un-American. If the current GOP presidential candidates don't repudiate Trump, I'm prepared to get in this race. What other candidates, first and foremost? Who the fuck has actually announced? Chris Christie's mulling it over. Nikki Haley is mulling it over. Pompeo is mulling it over, although I think that he does lean towards running because he wants to sell more books to the Chinese in order to get millions in kickbacks. DeSantis has not given any indicator that he's in the race. Liz Cheney hasn't either. Liz Cheney would probably end up being his running mate if he were actually nominee, which, to be clear, won't happen. I've decided to call him War Walrus, of course, to take off on the term War Pig, of Black Sabbath fame, of course. Ozzy Sabbath is best Sabbath, by the way. This dude is best known for being a decrepit warmonger. I don't know how old he is. I think he's pushing 80 as well at this point. It's funny because he worked with Trump. And so I guess the idea is, well, I have inside knowledge that Trump is off of his rocker. Name one thing that Bolton can do that Mike Pompeo can't do better. As being younger, definitely more charismatic, and more skilled with regards to how he handles public debate and things. Also, Mike Pompeo, less of a war walrus. So I think he would have the advantage. If you're going to have a split ticket anti-Trump vote and you end up with more than 2 people in it, you're going to have a problem. They're carving apart the anti-Trump vote. And DeSantis, I still think, is a long shot on running. I don't think that he's going to end up getting in. This dude's nuts. I have a feeling that he's just making these remarks, again, to sell books. He gets to go on MSNBC and NBC. He goes on Meet the Press. He gets to talk to people. He gets to put the fact out there that he still exists, unfortunately. John McCain would do this from time to time, too. He's playing the disavowal game, and he's hoping that other Republicans can be gulled into doing the same. The problem is it's based entirely on a false pretense. Donald Trump never stated that he hated or would challenge the Constitution. If you read what Trump posted on Truth Social, he's talking about election shenanigans, and he's insinuating that the Constitution is defunct, that it has broken down in the wake of that being accepted. He's not saying that he's in league with the concept of getting rid of the U.S. Constitution or suspending it Pinochet style to reform it or something like that. He, by the way, the other day, he rephrased what he had said and said, no, that's not what I said at all. You're fake news, as usual. I don't think that there are that many people that are on board the Trump train for 24 that are going to go back on their support for Trump based on John Bolton pressuring people. In fact, I don't think, if anything, it probably, because he's such a massive warmonger tied to the Bush admin, et cetera, probably what happens is that John Bolton pisses off independent Republican leaners and they flock to Trump or something like that. I say, well, John Bolton hates the dude. He must be doing something right. Definitely among millennials, that might play a role. For what that's worth, among the GOP electorate, by the way, Bocephus, Sticks, New Hampshire, and other blue Northeast states seem to have more freedom and gun rights than red states. Why? Is the New England better than Texas? Texas is definitely more pro-gun than most of New England. Massachusetts is an anti-gun state. Connecticut, Rhode Island, middling. Maine, middling. Yeah, Vermont used to be very pro-gun. Now they're even going after the constitutional carry element of gun control in Vermont. They won't succeed, by the way. I did get several news tips about that. Anti-gunners are trying to get rid of constitutional carry in the state of Vermont. The problem is the state of Vermont's own constitution prohibits such a move, so it won't actually happen. New Hampshire stands out as the one New England state that genuinely is pro-gun, partially because of the free staters rising up there. Texas and Florida and many other states are more laissez-faire. I think the Dakotas, certain other states. Some states are becoming more pro-gun, some more anti-gun. Overall, gun control is on the wane in the United States. They keep trying to revive the issue, and they're not having too much judicial success. Transylvanian 90. I love the hilarity of a war criminal who planned coups in foreign nations claiming that Trump is morally bankrupt for questioning a certain election. Yeah, I mean, the hypocrisy and irony is there. Maybe he just wants more attention. Maybe this is literally nothing more than, hey, I'm going to write a book again. A million copies got shipped to Beijing yesterday. I made a fucking mint. I'm practically on the New York Times list, and all the people rating the book happen to have Chinese IP addresses. Imagine that. Ram and Jam. Biden is visiting TSMC February 21st, where I work. They shut the job down so he can get carted around and do nothing. Thousands of construction workers are out of 2 days' pay. I wonder why he doesn't want us there. Yeah, he doesn't do very well with construction workers or anyone in any industrial capacity. James Flowers, I'm late again. I'm just going to rewind and sit quietly in the back. Good on you. So yeah, John Bolton is threatening to make a fool of himself. I'd be surprised if he cracked 2 points. He'd get a 2 share. It'd be hard enough for him to do that. Liz Cheney might have a better time of it, to tell the truth. Live updates. Supreme Court to hear case pitting gay rights against religion. Yes, this is the Lorie Smith case. This is from Colorado. Long story short, in Colorado, they have a prohibition against discrimination based on sexual orientation. It's enshrined in state law. Lorie Smith is a freelance web designer and is being queried as having not been interested in doing a gay site design, for a gay wedding, I believe specifically. Didn't want to work as a web developer for that. and gets sued. It's made its way now up. It's going to be argued before the Supreme Court. And I gave my thoughts on this morning, and I say this as someone, I'm non-Christian, I don't like religion, I'm anti-religious, and I support gay rights entirely. I do not care who gets married. I do not care who screws who, as long as it's all adults that are being consensual. I don't care about these things. I don't care if they want to hang upside down from the ceiling like a bat and get blood let into a vat and then beat off with their own blood. None of this shocks me. None of it worries me. It's going to happen anyway, regardless of the legal system. So I just say, fuck it. I don't care. That being said, as a pagan occultist who doesn't even like organized religion and doesn't have any problem with gay people, lesbians, etc., bisexuals, transgendered, whatever, I just don't care. I support Lorie Smith on this, and here's why. There is no compelling reason to force a freelance individual or a family-owned business to engage in behavior that is against some deeply held belief when there are alternatives around. There is one exception and one exception only to my thoughts with regards to commerce and idpol, basically. Gay and straight, black and white, etc., etc. Only one. If a monopoly is formed, a compelling monopoly, it would have to be arbitrarily determined by a court whether that exists. So think of the phone duopoly for app development between Google and Apple. Think of the social media public square, which is basically lorded over by 3 or 4 companies. Video hosting. You've got a couple of alternatives to YouTube that have grown larger, but really YouTube and TikTok and Twitch for streaming and stuff, they form a semi-monopolistic business structure. They are also taking government contracts. Of course, Google, parent company of YouTube, works with the CIA on drone development, et cetera, et cetera. They platform government services. They platform government figures. Taxpayer funds are used to subsidize them in California, usually. That's the case. They should not be able to discriminate. They should act effectively as Section 230 protected common carriers for people's opinions and for their content. Give them the protections, but no more moderation of lawful speech. Outside of that, small business, little chain or something, they should be able to do business or not do business with whoever they want. Now, they should not be able to query a person with regards to their identity. So, for instance, you have a ma and pa shop. Someone walks in, they want to buy carrots, and they say, "Are you a homosexual?" "Yeah, why do you think I'm buying so many fucking phallus-shaped vegetables?" "Get the fuck out of my store." No. That's you didn't have any reason to ask them whether they were gay. That would be unacceptable. But if somebody comes in and you don't like the way they're dressed, you can kick them out. We already do this in businesses. No shirt, no shoes, no service, dress codes at, upscale restaurants and shit like that. We already do that. We already allow businesses to ban people, including non-tech firms like Uber and shit. Uber banned, Laura Loomer got banned from like Uber Eats and Lyft and stuff like that years ago. We allow them already to do this, but somehow you have to bake the cake bigot. Somehow you have to design the gay marriage website splash page bigot. You're forced to do that if you're an entrepreneur or a small business, but if you're a major business that forms a technical monopoly, Congress is unwilling to bring up the issue and no court will take up your case. Courts routinely throw out discrimination cases against these big companies. It's because it's lopsided. If you're a ma and pa shop that makes $50K a year in profit or something, you're not capable of hiring the legal team that Twitter can hire now, can you? The gal faces. I know that is too ethno-political in regards to ye statement, but why well done steak is the right steak? Also, have you shot a snub revolver? I've never used a snub nose. Mine is just a regular sized revolver. HR Sportsman, by the way, 22 cal, top break, excellent little weapon. Probably needs a little bit of repair. Somebody may have dry fired it a few times, and it wasn't me. Yeah. As far as the Yeezy statement, as far as well done steak, no, medium rare is the proper steak. Salty Ironworker, good morning, Grand Poobah and fellow clankers, back from a month upstate with the wife and dog. Guns, food, nature, and peace and quiet. Loved every minute of it. Hope family as well. I'll let you get back to it. Stay safe. Glad you had a good time, and yes, everything is well here, thankfully. Can't wait to get back to Gunland. It's going to be pretty great. Next news story. This is David French putting this out, so the intelligence level is middling at best. Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson don't understand the First Amendment. Twitter is a private company, not the federal government. Well, then here's the point. It's a private company, although before it was publicly traded and, platforms government services, it still does. USGS alerts, NOAA weather alerts, taxpayer-funded edifices, taxpayer-granted corporations have a presence on Twitter. So my own problems with that basic line go beyond the pedestrian. But let's ignore that. It's a private company. So can't Elon Musk do whatever the fuck he wants? Because I keep hearing leftoids complaining about how he's being a dictator because he decided to ban a couple of Antifa accounts that were openly fomenting violence. By the way, MSNBC has a stink piece about that. Well, Elon Musk doesn't really like free speech. He got rid of these anti-fascist organizers. Yeah, terrorists. He got rid of people who are making terroristic threats and threatening to show up at Tesla offices and firebomb things. That's criminal. That goes beyond Twitter TOS. Last night, Matt Taibbi, an independent journalist, wrote a lengthy Twitter thread he called the Twitter Files. The thread purported to expose how Twitter made the decision to dramatically suppress discussion of the contents of a hard drive from Hunter Biden's laptop, but it inadvertently did something else entirely. It exposed the new Twitter owner, Elon Musk's profound misunderstandings about the First Amendment. This isn't about the First Amendment. This is about a political scandal that was wholly covered up by sleazy legacy media outlets and big tech, partially as a result of government coercion. There's where the First Amendment is violated. If the FBI shows up, wink, wink, nod, nod, look out for disinfo, and hands you a sheet of paper saying, hey, this story should be suppressed. If you're getting tips from the Biden team directly, a political edifice, some of the people in there literally in office at the time, certainly in staffer positions and privileged positions of PACs and shit like that, that is a violation of the First Amendment. And he goes off rambling about the hacked materials policy. The material wasn't hacked, and there was never any reason to suspect that it was hacked. Nobody cares about Hunter Biden's small penis. That's perfectly fine if Twitter's banning that material from being posted because technically it falls under revenge porn laws in some states for some reason. That's fine. What about all of the emails? They weren't hacked. They were there unprotected on the laptop. I like how people still proclaim there was no laptop. Hey, okay, genius. Where did they get the files from then? They've already been proclaimed to be real by the recipients of numerous of those emails. They've openly stated, in some cases, I think under oath, that the emails are real. There are verifications that it is actually Hunter Biden with Daddy and the business leaders and the cartel moguls that he claimed never to have met with. This was a story that was then covered up in some cases by partially taxpayer-funded media like NPR with the idea that it was disinfo, and so they refused to even investigate it. They refused to investigate it because their investigation would have inevitably turned up that it was real. NBC, CBS, and others have already admitted to this. I like how they bring up Trump's taxes as a cope on this, by the way. David French, yeah. His mind waved the white flag long ago, I think. I am not your kind. I live in Georgia. Early turnout crazy. Vote Herschel Walker, please. Yes, you need to, if you are in Georgia, you need to prepare and go vote. And don't just vote, get someone else to vote as well. It is going to be a narrow result. Yes, Warnock has an advantage. All the polls show that. It is an underwhelming one. It's a couple of points. Herschel Walker is feasibly capable of winning, depending on the turnout from people who mainly just oppose Warnock and don't want the Democrats to run roughshod over the filibuster. Rocky, definitely feeling blackpilled at the thought of nuclear war. Feels like the politicians are pushing for nukes to U.S. soil at some point. I don't think they want that because all of their properties and wealth would suddenly be a little bit less valuable. What they do want is they want an endless proxy war that they can profiteer off of. The problem is that the person they're trying to use as a pawn for the profiteering is going batshit and attacking Russian soil, and not just on the border, but hundreds of miles within Russia. That Manx guy. Smith case, non-government entities have certain rights. Government employees serve the people, supposedly, so they have few rights. Private business isn't a public servant. Exactly. It's different. If you want to get rid of a judge because the judge is saying crazy shit online, no problem with it. They have to be unbiased. I mean, they're not, but they're not supposed to publicly profess their bias. If some random worker on an oil rig or someone who owns a gas station says, the N-word or something, who gives a shit? If you don't like it, don't go to their business. Always spread awareness of the fact that the owner's a bigot. That'll bite into their profit. Lapco 92. Fourth Amendment only applies to the government, not private companies. Therefore, Walmart can go into your home and snoop to their heart's content. Bad logic. Yeah, I mean, there are synonymous arguments that could be made. What you really have to do when you're talking about the First Amendment is don't think about the amendment itself. Think about the historical backdrop against why the founders instituted the First Amendment. What I'm doing now is not technically protected by free speech at all. It's protected by freedom of the press. What I'm doing right now, who am I talking to right now? You're all hearing me, but who am I actually talking to? I'm talking to a computer. I'm not talking to you explicitly in person. I am disseminating information which is a bunch of zeros and ones in a mechanical and digital fashion. That's the rights of the press, specifically the printing press. Now, why was that important? Because back in old Britain, the government would break up your press if you published literature that they didn't like. Now, if the British government had used middlemen to do this, instead of sending in the regulars, it sent in random thugs from some chartered corporation, some naval dockyard workers to beat you up and burn your press, I think that the founding fathers probably would have taken that into consideration. Of course, they didn't do that, unfortunately. Jack's regret. Basta is Italian for stop or no more. Clank ha. Miami Cuz, didn't you mention before that even if Walker lost, that the filibuster will still remain intact because of Manchin, Sinema, and Feinstein? Yeah, but Feinstein is elderly, and Manchin's no spring chicken either. And it looks like the party wants to try to primary both Manchin and Sinema out anyway, and possibly Feinstein too. Think there's a reason for that. Eric writes, I've been thinking about moving to Alaska. In your opinion, what's the over-under that the RF, economically destroyed and perhaps like a caged animal, tries to take it back? No, Russia's not going to invade U.S. soil. 0% chance. I would say, why the fuck would you want to move to that climate? Jesus. No thanks. Anywhere colder than Vermont would be no friend to me. Next news story. Sources. McConnell caves to Pelosi and Schumer. Allows JCPA media cartel bailout bill to be included in defense package. Yes, Mitch McConnell has officially sold the nation down the river by including this. Now, it may or may not pass. It's up in the air. We're not exactly sure what will happen in the Senate, but we'll wait and see. Here's the problem. You are essentially bailing out the competitors of private independent content creators with their own tax money and claiming that it has something to do with national defense. This should never have even been an option. There should be 0% support among Democrats and Republicans for this bill. That's how you know it's a kickback. Hey, we're going to give money to these media groups that help keeping the uniparty in power. We're going, sorry, I had a Biden moment there for a moment. We're going to give them a huge amount of money because they're hurting because of big tech. And here's the problem. That's really the boogeyman that they're addressing. The idea is that Silicon Valley tech firms in platforming material have robbed local media, like regional outlets and stuff, of a lot of their viewership. And they have, to be clear, that's true. Mainly because, as was warned, when the term legacy media was originally coined in the late 90s, they didn't get in on the .com thing early enough. They then didn't get in on social media enough. Now, this harms big-time legacy media, CNN or a Fox or something, but not as much as it harms the local affiliate, which works with one of the bigger news groups anyway. That's the way that it works. And so Mitch McConnell thinks it's very important to bail them out, even though they're failing for a reason. Instead of simply trying 230 reforms so that Twitter and Facebook and all of these other sites, well, Facebook doesn't matter anymore, Instagram or whatever, that they can't discriminate against information. So they can't make it lopsided. They can't fuck with the algorithms to favor this major news group over this smaller news group that happens to be writing effectively the same story. Just implement 230 the way it was meant to be implemented. That's all you need to do. But that wouldn't make them any money. The groups would still be dying anyway because they're fucking boring. So now the government is literally going to take our tax money and give it to the people propagandizing to us. Should be ruled unconstitutional, but you know that no court case will be taken up by a federal court on the mark. Yeah, the McCarthy, by the way, I'm not a fan of Kevin McCarthy. He's the House GOP leader and may or may not remain House GOP leader. To his credit, he is the one of the four of them that didn't want to include it in the bill. Pelosi, Schumer, and McConnell were all on board with it. McConnell pretended to hold out for a while. The hope is that it doesn't pass. I think it will, though, unfortunately. Next news story, we've got a very big distraction. Protesters win a partial victory as Chinese cities start to loosen COVID controls. Here's the problem. Loosening the COVID controls is meaningless. The people are still slaves, and the government can re-implement any of those controls that they want at any time. The government of China has taken also, and here's the hypocrisy of people that are worried about what's happening in China, is basically just doing the same thing that was done in Canada. They jailed a bunch of people for protesting. They fined a bunch of people for protesting. They called them terroristic and threw them in the gulag. The United States, in certain states, they did the same. California, Michigan, certainly New York, places like that. It happened in multiple European nations. Not so much here. Like in the Netherlands, there was a brief lockdown, but it was more like just a curfew. And there was a mask mandate, but people ignored it and they never got in trouble. Like I never wore a mask when I went to the store. More laissez-faire, more laid back. It seems to be a very Holland way of living. I don't know about other countries. The French had a heavy-handed lockdown. The British had a heavy-handed lockdown. Many other countries did as well. My problem is, why would the legacy media be calling the Chinese protesters heroic and brave and everything good with the world when they derided protesters in all Western countries that did the same thing over similar lockdown measures in some cases, calling them terrorists and saying they wanted to kill grandma? The hypocrisy kills me more than anything else with this story. To be clear, they're not winning a victory. The Chinese government is still imposing lockdowns in China. They've simply decided at the regional level to pull back slightly in hopes that the problem goes away. My hope is that the people there keep protesting and rioting. My hope, although it's definitely a lost hope, is that the Chinese government gets overthrown. Somebody decides to take a hatchet to the back of Xi Jinping's fat-covered head and be done with it. But that won't happen, to be clear. If he got killed at all, because of his COVID bullshit, it'd just be by another communist anyway. It'd be some other start shoot wearing communist from within the same party, and then they would take over. Yay, the king is dead. Long live the king. Everything has changed now. This one's even more money grubbing, so they ended the lockdowns in order to increase productivity or something like that. Now get back to your mandatory 6-day work week, 10 hours a day, you fucking peasant. Matthias Cruz, fake news alert, China is not easing lockdowns. Exactly, that's the whole fucking point. They're not. A couple of regions within China have scaled back the outermost layer of the draconian lockdownerism in the country, and that's literally it. You are correct. That's my point. But Western media will look at that and say, oh, well, those brave protesters have caused the government of China to become more gentle and more kind. Praise be to China. Such a lovely country, blanketed in smog and filled with human rights abuses at every possible level. Next news story. Kyle Griffin posting here. He's a leftoid from MSNBC, so you're not getting an unbiased take here. Today, during Supreme Court arguments on LGBTQ plus rights, the acronym keeps getting longer. Eventually, you won't be able to tweet about it because it'll be too long for the Twitter length. Justice Samuel Alito joked about Justice Kagan being familiar with the Ashley Madison website and seeing black children in Ku Klux Klan outfits. Now, once again, of course, taking everything completely out of context. It's from an MSNBC talking head, so do I expect anything more? No, of course not. I would expect this particular kind of coverage. The context is important. When Alito is talking about black children in Ku Klux Klan outfits, he's making a sarcastic remark with regards to the liberal line of questioning coming from Kagan. Talking about children in Ku Klux Klan outfits, or talking about like the difference between having Santa in a Klan robe and a black Santa, and trying to make weird arguments about that for the purposes of the case with regards to discrimination that we talked about in Colorado. He's making a clearly sarcastic remark. He's not actually suggesting that he sees black children dressed in Klan robes. That would be asinine. He seems to have a little bit of an overdeveloped sense of humor. As far as the Ashley Madison website reference for Kagan, she was talking about a Jewish dating site. She was bringing that up and questioning. And then he made it as a sideways comment. As apparently, the leftoids in the media are very offended by this. By the way, just a moment, we have somebody at the door. I got a French press. Yeah, so my French press, I believe, just arrived. So I'm happy about that, because one problem about coffee brewing is, like, I don't really like to eat or drink things that are too hot. So I have to sit there for 5 fucking minutes waiting for the coffee to cool down. With the French press, I won't have that problem. Joy had by literally everyone, but mainly by me. Yeah. Oh shit, it's the Ukrainians. People think I was going to get Tim pooled or something. I'm in the Netherlands, so the odds of being Tim pooled, pretty low. Eric writes, if you could have been born as any other animal at any time in history up until and including today, which would you choose? Interesting. Well, being a cat would be pretty cool, as long as you're in a good family environment. You're not like, feral or something. I would say they'll probably be born as a raven or something like that, because, like, they're arguably the most intelligent animal is actually the corvid. Ravens, crows, magpies. Yeah, rooks. Being one of those would be pretty cool. I saw one that had some sort of fucking deformity over in the center of town at one point. Apparently, they even know how to have fun. Like, they've observed them sledding, like literally going to the top of snowy hills and then sliding down and cackling and doing it over and over. So 8-Bit Panda Strike. Hey, Sticks. Not sure if this goes through, but clank. Yes, I see it. Civic Nationalism 1776. With the legacy media laying off people, do you think we will see the death of the legacy media in our lifetimes? No. You got to look at it this way. People compete for time usage. If you combined all the networks together, the time usage is still huge. What'll happen is that the weaker companies will die off, and those people will go to the stronger companies. So you'll just see a steady compacting of legacy media. They'll still be there. They'll still have 99% of their moron audience, because those morons, and they're not going to enjoy the commentary they get here or something like that. What'll happen is there will be fewer companies. Fictitious, Dave Savage. Let's not forget media saying laptop Russian disinfo. Yeah, exactly. Mr. Sandvich, hi, Sticks, kept forgetting to ask, but were you ever into Warhammer 40k? Quite an extensive lore, books, and the occult stuff with the gods of chaos. No, I see it mentioned constantly, but I've never gotten into it. We've got a Rumble rant. Furniture. Shout out to my cat, Sandy. She is my, I can't say that word on a YouTube live stream. My Iga, I'll say. Clearly a reference to a shoe style or something like that. Something in Senegal. But yeah, as far as Samuel Alito, I don't see anything wrong with his comments. But I mean, that makes me a right-wing extremist, I suppose, having a sense of humor at this point. He's clearly joking in the first context. In the second one, if you read it in the context, it's not a joke. It's a sarcastic reference. It's not actually proclaiming that there are black Ku Klux Klan members. Although at this point, apparently the Nazis are like really racially diverse. Kanye is apparently the new Hitler. So, it could happen, I guess. Wouldn't that be funny? The Ku Klux Klan says, all of that anti-black shit from the past, we're just completely past that. We're going to let Jews and black people join our group. Still no Catholics, though. Something like that. Actually, I think they do allow Catholics in the Klan now. There are probably 5 of them, but next and final news story. Biden administration gives Maduro regime lifeline as Venezuelans cry foul. The UN has documented some 7,000 extrajudicial killings perpetrated by the Maduro regime. Yes, Texaco is now allowed to drill for oil in Venezuela. So Biden's not anti-oil. He's not anti-gas or any of these things. He's only anti-U.S. energy industry. That's really the long and short of it. He wants to put pressure on the American people to try to get them to buy electric vehicles and solar panels and shit like that. It's like a shovel-ready and Solyndra on steroids. And what I've warned of is that there will never be a return from this. You will never actually gain a return on your taxpayer dole that you're giving out to these pork barrel projects. It's basically vote buying on one end, number two, money laundering, because some of that money comes back into politics. They get the grant, they create the shell company. Shell company's not under the grant. Shell company donates to a PAC or something like that. Many such cases. There's a reason why Solyndra failed so miserably. This will happen to most of their efforts now. The oil will still be pumped. It'll just be pumped in Venezuela. So don't worry, the oil costs will come down. It's just that we won't be producing oil in the United States. That would be bad because people who work on oil rigs typically get enough of a salary so that they have the capacity for upward mobility. You don't want that. You don't want the peasant class to become more literate and have the money to start their own business. You don't want them to start because then you can't control necessarily that business. They might succeed and they might not share your political views. It pays for the people that are currently in power to do everything that they can to basically keep people on breadcrumb life support if they're poor and keep them, at the very least, keep their head down if they're in the middle class so that they can succeed. They can have the wild dream that maybe they have upward mobility. But really, at the end of the day, 99.9% of them will live and die in the same socioeconomic class. By suppressing upward mobility while rambling about the need to create more of it, you create a slave population. By the way, no more super chats, please. I've got to wrap things up. Civic Nationalism 1776. With the attacks on those Russian air bases, how close are we to a nuclear conflict, do you think? Also, what do you think of the concept of technocracy? I oppose a technocracy. I think it's a terrible idea. I'll get that out of the way. We are closer to a potential nuclear conflict, or at least an escalation of the war there, but it's not certain. At any given time, especially with regards to nuclear war, it's very, very unlikely. The problem is it shouldn't even be possible. There's no reason for it to be even possible that happens. Our biggest worry about nukes at any given time should be terroristic sabotage or outright accident, not deliberate use. The fact that that's even on the table puts us at a very dangerous footing. A la una en punto. The spoon clanks are finally back. Order has been restored to the kingdom. Richard Method. As a Christian, I find myself agreeing with you more and more on politics. Thanks for all you do. Part of that is because of the leftoids. They've gone so goddamn woke. I mean, consider it this way. On certain social issues, a former Obama voter, I support abortion rights, I support gay rights, I support real environmentalism, although not the bullshit that they're doing now. I don't actually have that many issues on which I tend to align with the right wing of politics, other than guns and taxes, basically. Now I find myself more and more siding with like the MAGA populace on foreign policy and shit like that, certainly on wokeness. And it's not because I've had any major change to my political views. It's because the left has gone so much further left into goddamn la-la land on certain issues. So I end up finding myself siding with fire and brimstone, like fucking Baptists and crazy shit like that. People that I never would have stood with politically, probably on any issue other than maybe guns, as little as 5 or 10 years ago. Sticks, hex, and sandpaper. The socket wrenches have declared themselves kings. I'm glad you showed up. Strong Matt. Texas Antique is the eBay store name. Old photos. Thanks for the shout out. All right, so you got Texas Antique. He has an eBay store. I like eBay. I like antiques too. Maybe I'll fucking take a look later. Transylvanian 90. The Venezuela thing is the same as the Dutch farm seizures. Exactly. Unbridled globalism in action seeking to destroy independent businesses and self-sufficiency. Exactly. The Dutch farms not producing food isn't going to create a food shortage. It just means less food will be created by the Dutch. What they hate about the farmers is that they're self-sufficient. Dutch farmers have done pretty well for themselves. They're living fairly well. They don't want them to be self-sufficient. They want to kick them off their land. The food will still be grown, but it'll be grown by wage slaves. It won't be grown by farmers that own their own land. It'll be grown on the same land in some cases by a corporation. And then the farmers can go and they can work for a wage on the same land that they used to themselves own. That's the whole goal. Fucking slavery. That's really what globalism ultimately leads to. All globalistic roads lead to slavery. It's not really fundamentally about one nation versus another. It's about the vast bulk of the whole world's population getting screwed, blued, and tattooed by a bunch of unaccountable leaders that all go to parties with each other. And yes, Fireburn on Rumble. The Dutch farmers are definitely protesting, along with a large chunk of the rest of the population. The police have been black vanning people. There have been riots. It is happening. And to keep in mind, the farmers may decide, fuck you, and not sell. I figure if I was a farmer and I'm already, I'm working my land, I own my land, I have a nice house and stuff. If I'm already making a reasonable amount for my labor, I'm not going to sell off. That's why the government eventually will try to seize the land. They'll try to force the farmers to take the deal. They will do that, by the way, just to be clear, unless Rutte is shoved aside. Like here, Wilders ends up being prime minister or something like that. Anyway, I think that I'm going to go off now. I enjoyed these chats. Don't worry, another live stream tomorrow, assuming I get some sleep. Last night, it was iffy, but I've got coffee, and now I have a French press, so it's a good time. That's about all. Peace out.